Good evening, guests, councillors, and staff. It's 5:01, so we'll get our meeting for this month underway. Before we begin, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Ngadjuri and Kaurna people, the traditional owners on the land on which we meet today. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present today. So we have just one apology for this evening from Councillor Dean Rawlack. There's no leave of absence and no non-attendance. The first order of business then is the confirmation of the council meeting minutes for the ordinary council meeting held on Tuesday, the 25th of February, 2025. I have a recommendation that the minutes and confidential minutes of the meeting be confirmed as a true and accurate record of that meeting. Do I have a mover of that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Fabio. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Lynette. We'll then put it to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. The second item then is the confirmation of council minutes of the special council meeting held on Tuesday, the 4th of March. There's a recommendation there on the screen. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Fabio. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Collin. We'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is communications. I've provided a summary already of the communications to the acting mayor. I'm not sure if there was an update from Mayor Bill as well. Would you like me to run through that, or are we going to?
Thank you, through the chair. They're just provided through the minutes.
Okay.
So we'll
We'll
our previous mayor will update the minutes for his, and if you'd like to run through yours.
That's okay. Thanks, Carrie. So over the last week or so, perhaps 2 weeks, as a deputy mayor, I attended the Kapunda Business Alliance Awards here in Kapunda on behalf of the mayor who was at Xavier College. It was great to see that event held here and celebrate the local businesses here that support the Kapunda community and recognise some of the excellent work that's being done. I also attended the Barossa Young Achievers presentations at Peter Lehman Wines in Tanunda with the Mayor of Barossa Council, and there's some great projects that are being led by some terrific young people in our community that I heard about in that afternoon. Yesterday I attended a briefing session on the GARP, which was attended by other mayors, councillors and staff from various councils that will be affected by it. I think it's fair to say, and I'm sure there'll be future reports on the GARP, that there's quite a lot of work to be done before the GARP has a material impact on our council area, but there'll be further information about that ahead as more information comes to light. Any elected members or councillors have anything that they'd like to table as communications? Okay. There's one document, Harry, that we'll table for council this evening, which is some correspondence from the Electoral Commission of South Australia. So following the resignation and retirement of Mayor Bill, there's some information set out in this letter for councillors to familiarise themselves with in terms of the process of appointing a mayor and subsequent elections. So I won't go through all that in detail now. I'll just leave it for everyone to absorb. Will that be published as part of the minutes, Carrie?
Thank you, and through the chair, yes, we will, as it's being a table document, we'll append it to the minutes as well.
Okay, thank you. So there are no petitions this evening. So moving into deputations and presentations, the first deputation we have this evening is from Tesseract Energy and Tesseractus Proprietary Limited. So I'll hand over to the Tesseract team to provide their deputation to council.
On behalf of the Tesseract Group of companies, I'd like to thank Council for this opportunity. My name is Daryl Bubner. I'm the Partnership Manager, and the slide that you're looking at indicates the agenda, the three people that will be speaking tonight, and I'm going to immediately hand over to Group Chairman and CEO of Tesseract Energy, Chong Tong.
Hello, thanks, Mr. Chairman and councillors for this opportunity for us to present our exciting project linked with our local council. First, we have this Tesseract Sigma project. This project is a utility battery project, is near the Temple West substation. So it's 200 megawatt, 800 megawatt hours utility battery, 4 hours duration. The size of the battery can run 100,000 homes for peak hour usage. So that is how much power. Second is probably councillor already aware there's currently building the project on the same substation. So our project proposal here is about 5 times bigger than the current project. It's significantly bigger. So this is a location near the Temple West substation. In this substation, there are 2 power grid. One power grid is a 132 kilowatt kV. Another power grid is 275 kV. So our project is connected to 275 kV power grid. So it's not a competition with the current project. So for the land location, so thanks Gavin. So we had a lease agreement. So we leased 25 acre land to build this future project. That land to the substation is about 1.5 kilometers. So this is the land area. Also in this land, we're also considering the future expansion, because right now it's a 4 hours battery duration is good for the market. But if you're looking forward another 5 to 10 years, we have the more renewable energy. By the time we need 8 hours battery. So the land right now we reserved can be expansion to 8 hours in future. So we started this project back to stage 1, back to 2020. So we had the DA approval, but at the time the project was only 1 hour duration. And then we only secured a small piece of land. But now we realize that land not big enough. So this is why, thanks to Gavin, so we are able to secure this new larger land. And then we are able to proceeding our project. Yeah. Just where are we on the project? So we will update our DA application in the Q2 this year. So DA approval likely in Q3 2025. And then so we are going to start a commissioning work on Q2 2027. It are able to connect the grid Q4 2027. So that is our currently timeline. So we have a great partner for this project. So we have the development application was made by this EHS, is an international reputable engineer firm. And in terms of the battery technology, we use for the best technology in the world right now. It's cathode battery technology that is can run 20 years lifetime over 10,000 cycle time. Most important, it's the most safe battery on the market today. So, so we also have strong local partners. Our EPS partner is Enervon. Enervon is a very successful delivery project in the South Australia, include the Torrens Island project for AGL. And then we work with Electric Night, already make the connection agreement and also the preliminary design, connection design. Now the last is about, so we want to engage with council and first from the information, consultation, engagement, and last is also our contribution to the local community. In this search, so we already thinking probably make if the project take off, we will try to make some donation for the local community. And also during the construction period time, the project probably got involved 150 to 200 contractors. Gavin already pushed me out. If you have project, if we can have a local contractor, we can give the first thinking and first priority. For us, that absolutely is possible. And also the so we want to build a long-term partnership with the local community. Yeah. One more words, and under my group, we also have what we call project called VPP for homes, which is we investment solar panel and battery at the customer home, and then we sell the cheaper energy to customer, help customer to reduce the how I say the energy bill. For example, right now we offer Adelaide customers 28 cents per kilowatt hours battery per kilowatt hours energy for peak hours. Right now, for example, in Adelaide, people already pay 56 cents per kilowatt hour, so can save more than half the price. So we want to extension our program to the Reading Council people, but we can provide more information if that's possible in the future. Thank you. I know I only have 10 minutes, so I already take 7 minutes.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Blythe. I'm the Sales and Business Development Manager for Tesseract ESS. Our part of the group focuses on commercial industrial customers, and I wanted to talk about a project that we're discussing with the Farm Centre. So I think it was that. I'm going to move through this fairly quickly. I'm sure everyone will have ability to have a look at the information at their own leisure. But essentially what we're talking about while we're getting the slide ready is a behind-the-meter solar PV and battery system for the Farm Centre, again, to produce and provide them with energy security, energy reduction in terms of their costs, and also reduce their emissions by generating the renewable energy for their use on site. The way that we provide that value is obviously avoiding those network costs, which are part of your energy bills by generating the energy and storing it behind the meter. It also allows you to reduce your peak demand when energy is most expensive. So it allows you to store some energy and use that at its most expensive times. Okay. Ready to go? There we go. So what are we proposing at the Farm Centre? It's a battery and solar PV system, as I said, 3 lots of 100 kilowatt battery modules supporting a 50 kilowatt solar power system. There's already 30 kilowatts installed at the farm, so they'll have 80 kilowatts in total. And they're providing, or they have the ability to provide backup power. We understand that we're looking at the farm centre as a possible emergency refuge. So the battery system will allow you to be able to provide power if the grid goes down for an extended period of time. So at the moment, the farm centre is paying about $22,000 a year in terms of their energy usage. And that little chart on the right-hand side there is showing you that peak period where the load is kicking up and also eating into that most expensive period of time in terms of energy consumption. This is the modules themselves, 100 kilowatt, self-contained. The module has all of its own management system. It has fire suppression contained in the cabinet itself. And we put multiples of those together. In this case, we're looking at 3 of those units, as well as the solar panels on the roof. And the little diagram up there on the top right is just showing those energy flows. So we're actually generating more energy than what the farm centre uses across the year, but it's about balancing when and how the energy is used, and also interacting to make sure you've got the best financial outcome for the farm centre. In terms of the prices, very quickly, you can see that table up on the top right there. As Chong mentioned before, in this case, they're paying a delivered energy cost of about 52 cents peak time, 30 cents off peak time, and we're offering a power supply of 39 cents and 27. So about a 25% reduction on their peak and about $5,000 a year in terms of saving. So a significant reduction, 25% reduction on their energy bill. In terms of the backup, I mean, what we've tried to do is come up with a balance between generation, demand, and storage capacity for the farm. And this is just showing you an example of the average energy usage across the year, and then also looking at a daily basis. So if you look at average energy usage across the year, the battery system, if you're 100% charged, could provide their average usage for about 3.8 days. That's just a breakdown of how the energy is used across the site in terms of generation and storage. And then just quickly, a couple of busy charts here, but the one on the right-hand side is the backup power generation. So that's looking at the current usage of energy at the farm, and then combining that with generation through solar and storage with the batteries. It gives you an indication of how long you could provide backup power at different times during the year. Thank you. I've moved through that very quickly, but thanks for your time.
Okay. This is to give notice of 2 unsolicited proposals. The first one is that we seek engagement with council managers for the purpose of obtaining power bills for council-owned buildings and facilities, and in order to analyse power usage and power usage patterns, so that we can prepare for the council proposals similar to the one that we have prepared for the farm centre. The second proposal builds on the pioneering work done by Mitcham Council when they engaged, after a tender process, Shine Hub and entered into a marketing partnership to promote solar systems to residents. We propose a marketing and promotion partnership between our company and Light Regional Council, which would operate on a very similar basis. The most significant thing, the prices offered by Shine Hub were until recently up on the Mitcham Council website, our prices are well over 10% lower than those prices. And the other point is that we would propose this on the basis that Light Regional Council earns a profit from the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you for a very informative presentation. There's lots of information in there for council to digest. Before I throw it open to questions from elected members, I suspect in respect of the last two items that would require a report from the administration on what's been requested here.
We deal with through our solicitor.
Through,
Receive.
yeah, okay.
It's very clear on how we deal with those.
Yep. Okay. Thanks, Richard. Any questions? Anybody? Councillor Simon?
Through the mayor, I do wonder that proposal that you have at the farm centre seems like a great deal. How far along are you with that, and how like, is that something that's going to happen, or are you just working this up, and is there any obstacles in the way that we could help you with moving that on if there's such a thing?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we're well progressed, well advanced. So we've looked at obviously the energy usage at the farm centre. We've had a number of site visits to look at the electrical distribution network on the site. And we have done a preliminary design in terms of the size of the system and also location of batteries, and also the linkages between obviously the solar panels, the batteries and the switchboard. So we are at a well advanced stage. The next stage is to actually sign a heads of agreement with the farm centre, which will, I guess, allow us to do detailed design and also start the discussions with the local network around connection agreements for that system. So it is well advanced, and obviously the liaison and communication between council and farm centre will be important, and we can support that in having that discussion.
You happy with that, Councillor Simon? Councillor Collins?
When you say Freeling Council, do you mean the Freeling Township? So it's only residents of the Freeling Township that will have access to the project, and if so, will any other towns be included in the future?
I think we mean the Lightning Council area, not only limited to Freeling Council, I think.
Oh, so you do mean
Yeah.
the whole?
Yeah,
whole
whole
the
area,
County
yeah,
of Kapunda is
yeah.
included, not just Freeling.
Yeah, because I'm not really figure out the Freeling Council and the Lightning Council, what their overlapping is, but probably wrong terminology. But we want to offer it. And then we have this product brochures, so can either council are interested and can share with you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you so much for your presentation this evening, and we look forward to hearing more about it in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the next deputation for this evening, which is a deputation from Kapunda High School Centenary Foundation.
Thank you very much. Acting Mayor Michael, elected members and council staff, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. My name is Andrew Hayward. I'm chairman of chairperson of the Kapunda High School Centenary Foundation, based obviously here in Kapunda. With me this afternoon is Barry Vogt. Barry was chairperson for 17 years and recently handed the baton over to myself. And it was a founding member of the foundation, and also Anne Hornsey, who is currently still the secretary, looking for a replacement, but also a founding member of the foundation. And they've both put in a lot of work over that 17 years to get the foundation where it is today. So firstly, I'd like to thank the council for your support of the past agreement of $5,000 over a 5-year period. That $25,000 that we received, or the students received, was able to be leveraged to 47,500 due to our affiliation with the Country Education Foundation of Australia and the participating universities that match the funds dollar for dollar to go to the students. So therefore, they get greater support from the foundation. Our foundation was started in 2007, following the very generous donation of former student Jim Bettison. And on the back of that initial donation, together with support of local businesses and also local community members, it's allowed the foundation to distribute funds to many students, while also allowing us to build a capital base fund for the future. So since 2009, when the first grants were issued, 150 students have received over $500,000 in support from the foundation due to the donations from business, from local government and local community, looking to support the youth of our region. The Kapunda High School is the only public high school in the Wright Regional Council zone, with 80% of students that attend the school living within the LRC boundaries. And therefore, any support is directly supporting your constituents and their families. Funding is paid on reimbursement basis and covers the costs of things like course fees, travel, books, accommodation, and IT. With the cost of the tertiary education increasing every year and the general cost of living at high levels, any financial support we can give to the students as they embark on their tertiary studies is invaluable. The Kapunda Centenary Foundation is one of the few public schools with such a foundation, and one of 5 in South Australia affiliated with the Country Education Foundation of Australia. With careful financial management, we continue to pay above average grant amounts compared to the national average of those other members. The financial support that we give the students is very important, but we also hear from those students that the moral support from their local community is also a major factor in them pursuing their study ambitions. Our board consists of very experienced and competent volunteers with a strong focus on governance. As mentioned, we're affiliated with the Country Education Foundation and we're guided by their rules and regulations. Our constitution is registered with the Consumer and Business Affairs in South Australia. We have an independent investment manager and investment policy to ensure the financial viability of our foundation for generations to come. So tonight we seek the council's support for a $5,000 per year over a 5-year period to allow us to continue our work to support the local youth and encourage them to chase their dreams. The Centenary Foundation Board, together with the students, greatly appreciate the council's past support, and we look forward to continued support in the future. And to reiterate that all funds that come through to the foundation are directed to the students upon application and at the end of each school year. So thank you for your time, and I will take any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Collin?
So you're after same amount as previous, so $5,000 a year, is that?
$5,000 a year over a 5-year period would be very nice. Thank you.
I'd be happy to move a motion to that effect if I'd have a seconder.
Okay. So we have a motion from Councillor Collin and seconder from Councillor Lynette. Thank you. Carrie, you right with the wording or? Yep.
None?
Right, councillors, there's a motion up there on the screen. Councillor Collin, would you like to speak to that motion?
No, Andrew's presented very well, and I'm happy to support and move the motion.
Excellent. Councillor Lynette, would you like to speak to it? Anybody else like to speak to the motion? There's no debate to close, so we'll put the motion then to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you again, Andrew, for your deputation.
Thank you very much.
Moving forward through the agenda, item 7, there's no adjourned business for this meeting. Moving then into the action items, item 8. Are there any questions in relation to the action items, councillors? Might just follow our usual practice. So first, page 7, any questions in relation to that? Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Sorry, thank you, Kyron. Councillor Colin, I think, and then Councillor Peter.
Yeah, just about the rate policy. I know we moved a motion talking about that in February. I'm just wondering, we haven't got anything in place yet. I'm just wondering how we're going with getting that done.
Thank you, Councillor Colin. Richard?
Through the chair, thanks, Councillor Colin. We are working on it, and we are going to put that through to the ARC meeting, the upcoming ARC meeting. And that would be the update on that rate revenue policy would be based on the discussion that we had in the February session. So definitely will eventually come to council.
Councillor Colin, does that answer your question? Thank you. Councillor Peter?
Kapunda, page 10, Kapunda Mine Historic Site, in situ recovery test proposal. When it's listed as being ongoing, when can we expect that we'll have information on that?
Thank you, Councillor Peter. Byron? Can you just give us a moment, Councillor Peter? We're just checking whether or not Craig's available to answer that question.
Through the chair, I am Acting Mayor Michael. Can you
Thank
hear me
you.
okay?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for that. Yes, just an answer to Councillor Peter's question. You may recall the resolution of council had 2 parts when it was last considered, which was signing off on a waiver of exemption for a test proposal that's been completed, and presently the expanded test proposal is out on public consultation and has another week or 2 to go. We've started receiving some submissions in relation to that. The motion allowed for the CEO to potentially action that matter depending on the outcome of the public consultation, but if there's submissions requiring consideration with council, I'll be bringing a further report, hopefully to the next month's meeting in April.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Peter, any further questions?
Well, I think I have to wait until next month's council meeting.
Yeah, that's what I understand as well. Yeah. Thanks, Councillor Peter. Thank you, Craig. Page 11. Councillor Collin?
If there's no one, I've got one, it's not on page 11, but it's, it was on page 11 last week, but Rare Road, I know, I've had a few people along there how we're closing it, and they'd like to know when it actually is going to be closed, because there's been some bad behaviour up there in the last, especially last weekend. So yeah, I'd just like to know when it's been done.
Thanks, Councillor Collin. I'll take that one and follow up for you.
Thanks, Megan and Councillor Collins. So that brings us to the end of the action items. So if there's no further questions, we'll move forward to item 9. There's no recommendations from committees. Item 10, infrastructure and sustainability reports. Are there any questions in relation to this report, councillors? Councillor Collin?
I've been asking a few questions. I'm not sure whether it's the time or the place to be asking them though, so I'm not sure. Do we only ask what's in this report, or we can ask how we're going with the roads and the amount of money that was allocated to them for the budgeted year, and what roads are left to be done?
Well, look, I think to the extent that this report covers an update in relation to, amongst other things, road asset renewal and maintenance, capital works, it would seem a logical place for a question like that to be asked if we're able to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Collin. Acting Mayor Michael. There will actually be a full report at the April meeting, which is our quarterly capital program report. All the information will be provided.
Councillor Collin, does that answer your question?
I've been asking a few questions via email, as you're aware, and you know, once we get into April, if we've got some of the programs still left to be done, and the budget amount hasn't been spent for reasons that I'd like to know why, and if there are good reasons, I'm sure you know, it will be explained. But I think April it leaves it pretty short to actually get the rest of the work done if there are roads to be done. And there was a list that was advertised in the annual business plan as well as in the quarterly update, summer update. So there is an expectation of people in the community these roads are done, and I'm just not quite sure whether April's soon enough.
So do you have a follow-up question then as to whether the remaining roads in the program are going to be delivered, or we'll need to wait for the April report for that?
The remaining roads for in the program will be delivered this financial year. I think the question is, Councillor Collin wants to understand the amount of money that has been spent on the roads, and an alternative list that was in what was adopted by Council in April. That information will all be, once we've interrogated all of the budget information, will be provided at April.
Councillor Collin, does that answer your question?
No, I'll wait till April.
Richard?
I think furthermore, it's probably worth adding that any funds that are available, the elected body can then choose, if they couldn't be delivered by the 30th of June, to carry those funds forward. So those funds aren't lost. Those are funds that have been budgeted. And so if there is money within the program left, and time doesn't permit it to be completed by the 30th of June, a carry forward would be undertaken.
Thank you, Richard. Any other questions in relation to the infrastructure and environment monthly update? So there's a recommendation at the bottom of page 16 of the agenda. The council receives these reports and the contents therein be noted. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Councillor Lynette, seconder. Thank you, Councillor Peter. I'll put that then to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. There's no update for strategy and economic development this meeting. Item 12, reports for information. First report is item 12.1, CEO's monthly report. Are there any questions from councillors in relation to that report? Councillor Simon?
I was just wondering how that country cabinet turned out, and if maybe the CEO can give us a short briefing or what actually happened and what got achieved for our council.
Yeah, Councillor Simon, Richard?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair. Yes, it was an extremely well received presentation. So we presented to Country Cabinet our Drovers Encounter overall vision, and that was the vision that is publicly available for everybody. We had the privilege to present that to, as I say, to the full cabinet, and I think it would be fair to say, of my feedback that I've got, our presentation, or I think the time that we managed to spend in there was probably close to 40 minutes compared with other councils who seem to walk out after 25. So we certainly took our full opportunity. It would be fair to say that the Premier was most interested in the proposal, to the extent that that afternoon he was here in Kapunda, actually walking across the site. So at this point in time, so we're very pleased that not only the Premier but all of the cabinet ministers are now across the project. Prior to that, it was really the Minister for Tourism who was very well across it, but a lot more ministers now. I then attended the community cabinet meeting that night, which was where that photo was, and the feedback to me from ministers was extremely good. It was something that the overall proposal of being able to showcase our pastoral history was something that is, a lot of them were quite excited by. Of course, it's not funded at the moment, so that's where it is at the moment. So, but otherwise, it went very well. So, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. You happy with that, Councillor Simon? We'll move on then to 12.2, Customer Satisfaction Action Plan, the quarterly report. Any questions from councillors on that report? And finally, item 12.3, Roseworthy Township, Section 138 clearance. Are there any questions in relation to that report? And in fact, are there any updates from staff in relation to any of the three reports before we go to the recommendation? No? Okay, so there's a recommendation there on the screen. Sorry, Councillor Collin.
Yeah, I was just asking, so the roundabout that Land Division, the application's been withdrawn, why is that? Stage 2 of the Senate DA has been approved, which includes the roundabout, so yeah, that means.
Thanks, Councillor Collin. Richard, who would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, no, I think Lisa.
Lisa? Thank you, Lisa.
Councillor Colin, so the application, there was an application that was lodged just for a land division and a roundabout. The applicant has withdrawn that, and what they've done is they've rolled the roundabout and part of those roadworks into the centre application as part of their stage 2. So they've dispensed with 2 applications and rolled it into one, and that stage 2 of the Centre for St Ives has received full approval. Is that your question, Councillor Ross?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because there was a there was an idea they're going to be a bit closer to Roseworthy, so now they've moved it back, have they? Or is that where they originally wanted it?
I'm not sure what you're referencing. Okay.
Thank you, Lisa and councillor Collin. If there's no further questions, there's a recommendation on page 25 of the agenda that the reports for information be received and the contents therein noted by council. Do I have a mover for that recommendation? Thank you, councillor Simon. Thank you, councillor Fabio as a seconder. I'll put that then to a vote. All those in favour? Those opposed, that's carried. Thank you. We now move into reports for decision. The first report for consideration this evening is the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority draft budget for 2025 and 2026 and the draft annual business plan for 2025 and 2026. Are there any updates to this report and recommendation from staff?
Yeah, no updates to the report.
Thank you, Richard. Are there any questions from councillors in relation to the report? Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Mayor Michael. Just a query. I noticed in the recommendation that one of the recommendations is that the FMA be disbanded. And if that occurs, why are we approving the funding for the following year? Is the timing different, or what am I missing?
Thank you, councillor Bill. Richard.
Yeah. You're right, there is a recommendation, but that'll really depend on where the business case actually ends up. And I think that's more around getting the government to take over the broader management of the Gawler River and its functions. It's probably not dissimilar to the manner in which arterial roads are managed versus how township streets are managed. So where you would have the government, the state government looking after more of the major networks of rivers. That is my take on it.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, you're saying that it's a gambit offer that the GFR will still continue, but in a lesser, different manner if the government takes over the reservoir.
I think that the detail surrounding that is not there at the moment of what the GRFMA would look like. Yeah.
Are you happy with that, councillor Bill?
Yeah.
With the answer?
Yeah, that's okay. But I would understand that if it was disbanded, the funds would be paid back or something. There'd be some amelioration to the various councils involved.
Councillor Collin.
So if it was disbanded, would we still have a financial obligation charged to us by the state, or will this be the last time we pay the maintenance and capital contribution?
I don't imagine that potential is a short-term one. I think there is still a significant amount to go. I think there'll be a lot of further reports around that before we even get near it.
And the business case, how's that going?
The business case at the moment is at the application stage to the federal government for funding.
Yep.
Okay, if there's no, sorry. Councillor Bill.
I'll move the recommendation.
Thank you, councillor Bill. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Collin. Councillor Bill, would you like to speak to the recommendation?
This has been an ongoing issue for a long time, and we've just got to keep rolling until the business case gets worked out and we can take the next step. So I don't think we've got any option but to keep going at this stage.
Thank you, councillor Bill. Councillor Collin, would you like to speak to the recommendation? Councillors, would anybody else like to speak to this recommendation? We'll put it then to a vote. All those in favour? All those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Item 13.2, Australian Local Government Association Federal Election Funding Priorities. There's a report for decision that's been prepared. Do staff have any further updates to that report?
No updates to the report.
Councillors, any questions in relation to this report and this recommendation? Councillor Collin?
The way they're throwing money around, should we put the amounts up?
Richard, would you like to respond to that? Sorry, Colin.
I'm just saying the amount that's been spoken about in the media by both parties, maybe we should be asking for a bit more. I think we're going a bit short on the road funding and other things. Maybe.
Through the chair, I think having the current funding splits changed so that more money comes into South Australia will be a challenge.
Okay, if there's no further questions, do I have a mover for this recommendation? Councillor Bill? Councillor Simon, seconder. Councillor Bill, would you like to speak to it? Councillor Simon? Anybody else? I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? All those opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Which brings us to item 13.3, which is a local affordable housing plan, a draft plan that's been prepared for consultation. Any further updates to that, Kyron? No. So there is a draft of this plan included in the attachments, together with a discussion paper. Are there any questions in relation to the report and the plan and the recommendation? Councillor Simon.
Yeah, I would like, it's more a comment than a question, but in the report itself, we have the strategic pillars, and then there's monitor, inform and monitor, advocate, partner and support, and intervene. So I can see most of these things are just, I fully agree with all of it actually, but it doesn't seem like it's gonna, it's not gonna cost us anything, which is probably a good thing. The one thing though that I do have an issue with is it says on the partner and support, it says engage with the state government on strategic housing projects, which that's fine. But it says e.g. Greater Adelaide Regional Plan development. So just in light of our premier, throwing the door wide open for greenfield developments, as far as we can go. And we as a council, I thought we were pretty adamant against that. I just wonder if we need to reword this a little bit, or just make sure that we're happy to work with the state government on strategic housing projects, but we're not happy to support that or for gold, so that build over the best farmland in the country. So that rubbish, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right, Councillor Simon. In our response to the draft GARP, we were very clear about not wanting further residential development to encroach into primary production areas in Roseworthy. I might turn it over to Kyron as to whether or not it would be possible to, or how we would go about noting that response somewhere in this plan.
Yeah, I guess through the chair, it really just comes down to that particular objective and action, which is in the draft plan under partner and support, which the draft objective is to work with the state government on regional housing growth, and the action is to engage with state government on strategic housing projects. Obviously, in brackets there, we've got, for example, satellite city developments. I guess it doesn't necessarily need to involve GARP satellite city developments. That could be housing developments in other townships like Freeling and Kapunda that are also referenced in the GARP as well. So, yeah, if it's a matter of just not providing an example in there, or you may even wish to be specific and reinforce the council's position. I think it was back in November in terms of its submission to GARP. So I guess that's probably the space to do it in the plan is under that particular action and just providing any clarification. So
Yeah.
sort of happy to if that could be via way of a different type of motion to talk specifically to that particular action.
I think there are a couple of key messages, weren't there? There was a response in relation to the primary production areas, and there was also, I think, a response which was put forward by Councillor Simon and ultimately incorporated into the response, which was to encourage higher density developments and not necessarily discouraging the scheme, but encouraging the state to push for higher medium density development so that we're not encroaching onto those primary production areas. So, Councillor Simon, is that something that you would like to see reflected in this plan?
Yes, I would very much encourage to put something specific in there, saying specifically in light of what the Premier just came out and said about, you know, not having that 85, 30 or 25, or 15 split anymore for high density to greenfield. Specifically, him saying we're gonna build over Rosebery, like this next big project. I think it's very important that we as a council stake our ground and said we do not want to change the food and environment and food production areas. We don't want to infringe on that state legislated area. However, we are happy for more growth and everything, but it needs to be in a smarter way, in a better way for the community, a better way for the council, just better way for the environment. In any way, there's much better ways to do it than just opening up more land and have the developers go rampant. So I really, really would love to see something in that would specifically mention that, because the way I thought it, I think council is pretty clear about that.
So if I could make a suggestion, would it be practical then, Councillor Simon, do you think, to move an amendment to this recommendation to the effect that the principles set out in our response to the draft GARP are updated in the plan?
Sorry, through the chair. We actually don't have a motion on the table. There's been no mover, so this is just merely a recommendation, which move whatever motion you would like to move, and just add, if it's something similar, add some other points and just let the minute take a note.
Councillor Collin.
All this is saying, so it's going to go for public consultation. So you, as we could actually, or anyone in the public can actually just say what you said, Simon, and make a presentation to council or to this and get it changed. So this is not the final act. So there is an opportunity from here on to do that. So we could just move this, get the plan out for the public, and then review it when it comes back the next time. Would we be happy with that?
Councillor Simon?
Yeah, I think it'd be more important for us to take that stance and then have the community, maybe the community doesn't agree with me or us, that's quite possible. So, but I'd rather for us to take the stance first and then the community respond to it and say, yeah, that we agree with that. Oh, no, we do want to build over the greenfield stuff. So I think it's important for us to take that stance, specifically in line that we're now really going against the grain of the state government and everything. I think we really need to stake that very clearly in this at this point.
So then to move this forward, just to be clear, we would need to have a mover of this recommendation and then of a motion. Yep. Yep.
Thank you through the chair. So we'll need a mover of a motion and just stating if it's something different to this, what that is, and then a seconder to progress.
Okay, so we have a recommendation as it stands at the moment on page 34, which is up on the screen. So do I have a mover of that recommendation? Councillor Simon.
I mean, I'll first say something like that. I think the report is good. I think that it's a good report. And I'd love to move this recommendation. If you can somehow just, as Karen said, I think it needs very little wordage to change just in that one on the partner and support at that point, as Karen rightfully pointed out. If we can just put that in the motion saying that we're going to have that little change before we put it out to consultation. I'm not a good wordsmith, but if that's somehow possible, that would be my intention. I'd love to move such a motion.
Harry?
Thank you, through the chair. We'll need guidance exactly what it
Yep.
is that you're after. So, just to assist the process, I'm suggesting that after subject to, we can put a dot point A. And then you can say what other things you would like amended within that plan to go out then for public consultation. Do you have, is there kind of a sentence that you can add on to that for what is to be included?
Yeah. So the only thing I can think of is, I think, as Karen said, if you could just say, because it was a resolution, I think it was a resolution of council, wasn't it, that we said, or that we could say, maybe something like following our resolution or our submission to the GARP that we put through or something. Because in there we clearly said that, like some like that. I think Karen had it pretty close before.
Yeah, that's right, Councillor Simon. There was a letter that was endorsed by council that was sent in response to the GARP. Kyron?
Yeah, through the chair, if I can just perhaps make a suggestion, Carrie, you might even type something up, but just under the third dot point, I think you can achieve sort of, I think where you're going with this, under that third point, to insert some words after where it says, as outlined in the draft local affordable housing plan document. Between document and the comma, you could add some words along the lines of as amended under the action which is to engage with the state government on strategic housing projects consistent with the council's submission on the draft Greater Adelaide Regional Plan.
I'm very happy with that. It sounds a bit complicated, but in the end, really, in my opinion, what it needs to do is that you possibly change the report a little bit along those lines before it goes out to public consultation. If this does it, I'm happy. I'll move it. Happy to move that.
Councillor Collin?
Are we getting a bit confused here? Like, this is about affordable housing. What you're trying to do is stop urban sprawl. So the GARP is separate from this, isn't it, a bit? So if we want to do something about the GARP, the Great Adelaide Plan, I don't think we're discussing this in this housing policy, are we? It seems a bit, you're chasing the wrong rabbit down the wrong hole.
My issue is, if I can respond to that, is that under the guise of affordable housing, the state government and the federal government's absolutely unleashing greenfield developments, and it's under the guise of, oh, we need more affordable houses. We need to build more of these things so that people can afford houses. Me as an economist know that it's just hogwash. I'm sorry. That's not going to solve the housing crisis. We need to be different. So what I'm saying is, since we are doing a affordable housing plan, I want to make it very clear that we understand that we do want affordable housing, we do want to support that, but that does not mean that we need to do greenfield developments, because that is not a solution for affordable housing. It is not a solution for affordable housing. I just want to make that very clear. That's why I think it's the right place to put that, because we're running against the grain of not just Adelaide or the state government or the federal government. So we need to stake our ground. It's really, to me, it's very important. If it's just me, that's fair. But I mean, that's why I'm trying to put it out there.
All right, thank you, Councillor Simon. Councillors, I think we've now got a recommendation that is being moved by Councillor Simon, which is as displayed on the screen. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Allison. Councillor Simon, would you like to speak to that recommendation?
I think I've spoken of.
Councillor Allison.
No, I think council knows how I feel about urban sprawl and greenfields and our prime farming land. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor Ellison. Councillors, would anyone else like to speak to this recommendation? In that case, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.4, 2025 National Small Town Reinvention Conference sponsorship. There's a report for decision that's been provided in relation to this, and there's a recommendation on the screen. Are there any further updates from staff in relation to the report for decision? Sorry, Kyron?
Through the chair, you might note in the attachment, which is the sponsorship prospectus, that I guess the $10,000 option there also allows for the council to provide in-kind sort of hosting as a sponsorship rather than cash. So I just wanted to highlight that to the elected members. And what that might look like is if it's hosted at Dutton Park, the council would directly fund the I guess the higher costs and any sort of AV equipment that is needed to host the event there and the catering and the like. So that might be a slightly different option for the council to sort of see that it gets more control over what the sponsorship is spent on. So I just thought I'd highlight that.
Thank you, Kyron. Councillor Bill?
Yeah, Michael, does that need to be put in there, $10,000 cash or in kind, just to make that specifically noticed?
So at the moment, the recommendation is for a $10,000 cash contribution for Platinum sponsorship. Is that correct? Correct. Yeah. Are you happy with that, Councillor Bill?
I'd like to see it noted that it's cash and in kind, so it's not a specific amount that goes there hanging out. So you haven't given us our 10 grand yet. So
Okay. So just before we leave that, so are you looking to move a motion as amended?
well, I'd approve sponsorship of $10,000 cash and in kind services from the council. Cash or in kind services from the council.
Thank you, Councillor Bill. Councillor Collin?
Yeah, we've already done 10,000 in kind, haven't we? So this will be $20,000 investment by us. Well, the last meeting we said we'd give 10,000 in kind. So this will be 20,000 in kind if we do it in kind, or the way I saw it, we gave them in kind last time, and this time they want money to advertise and things like that. But that's the only way I read it. But
Kyron, can you clarify that for Councillor Collins?
Through the chair. So at the previous meeting, the in-kind was really for staff labour to assist with coordinating and organising the event. In the context of, I think, what Councillor Bill is talking about, the in-kind would be it'd still be a cash expense to the council, but it wouldn't be via the organiser. So it wouldn't go to Bank of Ideas. It would be a direct hire fees to, say, Dutton Park, if that makes sense. So it's still a sort of a cash contribution, but it would be direct to hosting parties. If that makes sense.
Well, that's where the confusion, because in kind to me means it's council staff doing work, but you're talking about a cash payment to Dutton Park or some other council thing. So it is really cash. So, anyway, I'm happy to move it. I think that if we've decided to have this thing in the town, I think we have to support it, and financial support and a bit of cash or in kind as it's put. I'll be prepared to move it.
That's right, yeah. Thank you, councillor Lynette. So I have a second. I wasn't sure if councillor Collin, were you seconding the motion that's on the screen? Yeah, councillor Bill moved it, yes. You'll second it. So sorry, councillor Lynette. Councillor Collins seconded the motion. Councillor Bill, would you like to speak on the motion again? Are you happy with it? Yep. Councillor Collin, would you like to speak to the motion? Would anybody else like to speak on this motion? In that case, I'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? Those opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Item 13.5 on the agenda is a report for decision in relation to the plant and fleet replacement program 2024-2025 update. Megan, is there any further updates to this report for decision? No. Councillors, any questions in relation to this report? In that case, there's a recommendation on the screen and on page 45 of the agenda. Do I have a remover? Councillor Lynette, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Collin, thank you. Councillor Lynette, would you like to speak to Councillor Collin? Would anybody else like to speak to this motion? Councillor Fabio.
I just have a quick question. How many hours were on the excavator?
Thank you, Councillor Fabio. Megan? Jason?
1347, Councillor. 1347.
Thank you.
Happy with that, Councillor Fabio? Very good, thank you. If there's no further questions, then we'll put this to a vote. All those in favour? All those opposed, that's carried. Thank you. So item 13.6 is in the supplementary agenda. So this is a report for decision to release the draft sport, recreation and open space strategy for public consultation. There's a very comprehensive report and strategy that's been included in the supplementary agenda. Kyron, do you have any further updates to add to this?
Yeah, through the chair. And firstly, apologies, councillors. This has been a long, drawn-out process. So probably almost a couple of years in between some consultation and what we have as a draft plan today. So apologies for that extended timeframe. I think this is a pretty important document, firstly, to outline the categorisation of council's parks and reserves and open space. It's certainly something that the council will be inheriting a lot more of down at Roseworthy. So it's pretty important to get that categorisation right, because it really does set the levels of service for council moving forward. And it also provides the opportunity for council to have regard to its existing spaces in its existing townships and what's needed to maintain and potentially upgrade them in the future. So that is the draft plan that you have before you for consideration. And I think the other comment that I'll make is that this plan will certainly serve us well over the next, in my view, over the next 10 years with the development that we've got underway at Roseworthy. So I think it's certainly something that, wouldn't be impacted in the short term by anything that the state government might plan in terms of Greater Adelaide Regional Plan. That would be another set of investigations should that proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyron. Councillor, is there any questions in relation to the recommendation or reports accompanying them. Thank you, councillor Simon.
I just do have a question about the report. So in essence, there's almost like there's two reports. It's the background and consulting, not consulting, it's just the background report, and then it's the light regional sport, recreation and open space plan. So are we adopting both? Like if you're putting them out to public consideration, both of these? It just seems like the second one pretty much summarizes the first one anyway. So there's a fair bit of duplication. So it seems to me like the second one is the one that's the actual report, and the first one is for further reading, sort of thing.
Yeah, through the chair, certainly we would look to publish both documents. Certainly there's background research that underpins the strategy. So I think it's important context for the community to have regard to. We'd certainly take feedback on both.
Councillor Simon.
Yeah, I mean, the comment. I mean, these are some very in-depth reports, and I completely agree. It's going to serve us well for the future. One little thing that I saw in that, well, I can't find the page right now, but I mean, it was talking about Roseworthy, and then there's obviously like if you look at where all the stuff is, Roseworthy is really lacking much infrastructure at this point, or public infrastructure. I just wondered if it sort of sounds like we are going to have to develop it or plan for that. I mean, we might have to plan, but I would just again emphasize that it's something that we need to make sure that developers provide and build and do, that we push them to do it and we plan for it, whatever. But it's not at our cost. Just a comment at that point. But yeah, great plans, and I'm sure they're going to serve as well.
Thank you, councillor Simon. Councillor Collin.
Yeah, I was just going to talk pretty similar to what it says, identify appropriate land parcel in the township of Roseworthy, with AFL. The recommended site should include, playing fields suitable for AFL, cricket, soccer and netball. I noticed there's a footy oval down there, but that's not going to be enough for the population that's expected to be there in the near future, let alone. So, we really have to enact this quite, you say that it doesn't have to be something in the short term, but this really has to be done. And you'd think that if they're going to build something as substantial as they have at Lyndoch, you'd expect that something similar would have to be built at Roseworthy, wouldn't you? That would be a facility with more the population density around this area is more than Lyndoch. So the expectation of us should be to get something similar. So we should be leaning on the state government and developers to do something similar.
Gar, anything to? Thank you, councillor Collin. Councillors, any other questions in relation to this? So there's a recommendation up on the screen, which is also on page 3 of the supplementary agenda. Do I have a mover for this recommendation? Thank you, councillor Simon. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, councillor Collin. Councillor Simon, would you like to speak?
No, thank you.
Thank you, councillor Collin.
No.
Anybody else, councillors? In that case, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you. That brings us now to questions on notice. Item 14.1, we have a question on notice from councillor Collin. Councillor Collin, there's a response to your question on notice contained in the agenda. Do you have any further questions in relation to that response?
Well, I forwarded some questions on notice. Yeah, because I'd like to know. I just have to go find this bloody thing, but yeah, just because we budgeted 460,000. It was made very clear to us at the time by Nigel that the computers were not up to standard and it had to be done quickly. And it was suggested maybe put them in a lease program. The lease program was said to be not the right option. So the following questions I do have from that question is, one is, why is it taking, why are we waiting until May 25 to replace these computers? Why suddenly is a lease option the preferred option when we were told that it wasn't? And out of the money, the 460,000 was, I know leasing is regarded as capital, but how is that going to affect the budget bottom line by the end of the financial year? Those were the three.
Thank you, Councillor Collin. I did brief the staff on those questions, so I'll turn it over to Richard.
Yeah, thank you, and through the chair. Yeah, look, quite rightly. I mean, when the budget was adopted, there were budget estimates only. There had been no procurement process undertaken. So obviously, once we get the budget adopted, we go through a procurement process. And that procurement process, concluded in January 2025. So not uncommon for these sort of things that are quite detailed, where we're specifying computers and all of the requirements with them, to take a good couple of months to put that documentation together, and then obviously the assessment that goes with it, and then the acceptance, etc. So that's why it's not uncommon with time delays. And but in terms of the movement from a lease to or from an outright purchase, one of the submissions identified a leasing option. And of course, the beauty with the leasing option that we took was that not only did they supply the computers to us, they actually take them back and wipe them. And that's actually quite handy. So if you can imagine wandering through any office these days, there's quite a lot of equipment there. So that now is no longer council's issue to get rid of. So of course, like all of the bits and pieces that we've got now, council staff, of course, which there aren't enough of to undertake the wiping of computers, cleaning all the data off of them, and that needs to be undertaken. So we're actually paying for that as part of the leasing option. So I see that as a pretty good outcome. In terms of the impact to the budget, that'll come through at the budget review once those costs actually start hitting the budget. But I think your point being, are we going to spend $460,000 of capital money in 24-25? The answer to that will be no. In fact, when the computers arrive, you could imagine there's only going to be a small portion of a lease fee that will hit this year's budget, but that'll all come through in a budget review and identified with the elected members.
Councillor Collin?
Yeah, that answers the question a little bit, but it still doesn't answer why, when we asked Nigel at the time why leasing wasn't preferred. Like, he told us that because the number of computers had to be replaced, so there was too many for the leasing option in the 1 year. And then we were actually provided with a capital IT refresh, 396,000. It was basically a quote, like he had staff laptops, 65 at $2,400 each. A manager's laptop at 2,700. So the way I looked at that, we'd already done the procurement. So, well, I think we were led to believe that because the thing was, we had to get it done because the computers weren't good enough. And now it's a year. It just surprises me that we can be told one thing and then another thing's enacted.
Richard, did you want to respond to that?
I'm not sure I can add much more than what I've already said. Yes, the computers are an issue. I mean, I'm sitting here at the moment. I wouldn't get through an hour of the council meeting without charging my computer, as an example. And I know that there are plenty of other staff like that. Unfortunately, we've got what we've got. We need to get into a rolling plan where we're actually having the computers for the 3-year lease period and then changing them over, handing them back. We think that it's been a good procurement outcome. But the reality is what staff bring to the elected body as part of budget development is not procurement. It is budget estimates. And that is all we're bringing. We do not do a procurement process ahead of seeing budgets being adopted.
Councillor Collin? Item 15 is questions without notice. Councillors, are there any questions without notice? Councillor Bill.
Thanks, Mayor Michael. Yeah, there's been a lot in the paper just recently about the farm situation, the drought policy, and I would assume we'll be looking at drought support for farmers and associated rural industries in the budget process. But my question relates to those rural ratepayers that seek hardship provisions. What is the cost of them not paying their rates at this stage? Is there some interest rate charged, or what is the cost of that procedure?
Good question. Thanks, Councillor Bill. Richard? We'll have to, the question will need to be taken on notice. Councillor Bill, is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to motions on notice. Sorry. Oh, Councillor Simon, sorry.
If I may, I think I got two more questions. One is about the green waste. So if I remember correctly, originally we had a sustainability working party, and through that we sort of came up with the idea that we might want to extend the green waste bins to the Gawler Belt area onto the people that only have a 2-bin service. And then we did have a trial. Trial came back so that most people didn't want it. And then I think we binned it. I think we had some sort of, reconciliation saying, oh, no, it's not worth it, and we're not going to do it. And then we done a customer satisfaction survey, and the thing got brought up again. It's like some people want it. So I'm just not really sure. Was the first one wrong? What's changed now? Because I think we pretty much got some pretty solid answer the first time around. I was just wondering what's this going to change, this new rolling out and trying to get bins out there. For myself, I'm all for green bins. It's the best thing ever, but I can see that the public might think differently of them.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Megan?
Thank you, Councillor Simon. The Green Waste survey has recently gone out. That is purely a survey to gauge the interest from the people, because the customer satisfaction survey, the customer survey that went out came back suggesting that maybe there were more people interested in a green bin service in those rural areas. So we're doing the process again. At the time when it was done back with the Sustainability Working Party, there might have been a few people moved house, new people have moved in, some people moved out. So we're doing it again.
Thank you, Megan. I think there was some feedback that some people were perhaps aren't aware of the survey at the time as well, which was only online. Councillor Simon, you had a second question?
Yes, I do, if I can. I was just wondering about the election. So I just shortly glanced over that paper that we got from the Electoral Commission, but one thing that stood out obviously is the Section 12 of the Act identifies that the council is responsible for the provision of information, education, and publicly designed to promote public participation, blah, blah. So we are the ones that have to basically advertise for it. I was just wondering if he already got some plan on what we're going to do about it, or if we're just going to adopt the material that the Electoral Commission is going to provide to us. So just wondering how far we're into that at this point in time.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Simon. Carrie?
Thank you, and through the chair. This came through today. So as far as preparation, not yet. We obviously had our extensive communication plan at the election, like at our last election. I suppose we would look to do another communication along those lines. As far as how much, I think that would be dependent, because obviously that would be come out of our budget as far as the amount of education promotion and through the community.
Yeah, through the chair, in addition to the letter, we actually have been given a model communication plan and information that would that we can use. As Carrie said, we literally got this at 1:30 today. So yeah, and as you can see, or from what we can pick up from the plan, it appears as though the federal election is very much going to delay it. There's a month in there where it appears as though nothing's being done in May. So I was expecting we're not going to be far off the end of June, but I think at the moment you can see it's end of July and before the the polling actually closes. So
Thank you, councillor Simon. Item 16, there's just one motion on notice for this evening, brought to us by councillor Fabio. Do I have a move? Would you like to move that motion, councillor Fabio?
Yes, if I may, and if I may speak to it as well.
Sure.
Yep, sure. So the motion on notice as it reads is basically pertains to a section which might seem insignificant to some people, particularly if you haven't travelled on that section of road. However, it is the southeast end of Waikato Road where it bends around and then heads southwest and joins up with Bethel Road. It is a short section of road. The length of the unsealed section currently, I don't have the specifics of, because it does. It is influenced by how far the little spur comes off of Bethel Road while the construction is happening. But I estimate it to be probably less than a kilometre anyway. The intersection. That Waikato Road runs basically at the western base of the ranges. This road services many things, along with the Bethel Lutheran Church, which was built in 1895. It also serves as an ingress and egress for emergency services in the event of fires, accidents, and medical emergencies, things like that. It is also extensively used by farming activities, field bins and things like that, and residential usage as well. It also acts as a through road from Tarlee Road down to Bethel Road. And although the rest of the road is in reasonable condition, this specific section between Bethel Road and 83 Waikato Road, where there is currently a stretch of bitumen, which is paid for by the owners of that property. Throughout this section, there's quite a significant steep rise, which becomes heavily corrugated shortly after grading, within weeks, in fact, and has quite an extensive off-camber corner, which has in the past been quite an accident hotspot. There is very little data that supports that, unfortunately, because the majority of the accidents are single vehicle accidents, where obviously the person is at fault, and so there's a little bit of embarrassment involved there. And a lot of the accidents do go unreported for the simple fact that they run off the road, generally due to loss of traction. Possibly speed is an influencing factor. However, the road doesn't support any speed much greater than about 40 kilometres an hour, particularly in inclement weather. And generally those the people that have the accident will back out and take off without sort of hanging around and getting an earful from the adjoining farmers as to why their fences have become wrecked. So the motion is quite simple. It is suggested that this will be obviously the report be done, and then future consideration be given to sealing of this section of road. The timing of that section of sealing of section of road to leverage best on cost efficiencies would be to have it done at the time when the second stage of Bethel Road is done. So there's already heavy earthworks equipment type thing, graders and other equipment there. So it would be sometime next year. Obviously, this is not included in the budget for Bethel Road, so it would be an additional cost. But at this stage, all I'm asking for is perhaps a traffic study and maybe just a report on the general condition and the longevity of the impact of grading and how long the grading program sort of lasts before the road deteriorates back to what's almost an unserviceable condition.
Thank you, councillor Fabio. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Collin. Councillor Collin, would you like to speak to it? Councillors, would anyone else like to speak to this motion? In that case, we'll put it to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Thank you. Item 17, are there any motions without notice this evening? Item 18, are there any confidential, there's no confidential items for this evening. That brings us to the end of the council meeting agenda. I understand that there's a briefing session to follow, so we can end the meeting. So I'll just take some advice from you, Carrie, on just how the mechanics of that works.
Thank you. And through the chair, it's advised that a presentation or has been requested in regards to some budget information. So we would hold that within the meeting, so it's still part of the meeting. It would just be suspension of meeting procedures. The mayor would only require 2/3 to agree to suspend meeting procedures. Your reasoning around that would be to receive presentation and receive questions or any information from elected members.
Just to clarify then, so in suspending meeting procedures, is that a motion being brought forward, or am I suggesting that we do that?
You ask and you just need 2/3 to agree.
All right, thanks, Carrie. So there will be a briefing session on the annual budget that's been requested by the CEO. In order for that to be, I think, a productive conversation style session, I'd be suggesting that we I am suggesting that we suspend our meeting procedures. So could I call for a show of hands in favour of doing that, please? Okay, so I think that's carried. I do need to set a time.
2 hours.
Do I need to state a time?
I just got a question.
Okay. All right, thanks, Carrie.
Carrie,
Thanks, Councillor.
Now I'm going to do this again. Oh, lovely stuff, and thank you very much. And look, the idea of this is certainly not to bore people, but it's really just to get to a point tonight where elected body is understanding what we are starting to prepare as decisions will need to be made fairly soon, both for the Audit and Risk Committee meetings, but of course of Council as it develops its budget up and starts moving towards the public consultation period, etc. There we go. Cool. So the idea is there's a few bits and pieces there that'll come through in your stuff. I just want to rip straight into it. You've seen that one before. Hafiz presented that when we were down at Hewitt that day, and it really just goes through the process that we're all going to go through here. But what I really wanted to touch on before we sort of kick into all of that, and that is the plans. There are, you can count the dot points later, but there's about 20 different plans that we use, starting right from our strategic plan and going through to open space strategies and public art strategies and all of those things. And what's really important to remember is that council has adopted all of those plans. Not only did it adopt the plans, it says go and do those plans, and a variety of funding will have been provided for those. So it's really important that we don't sort of, you know, look at the budget in too much isolation, and that we understand that we've actually asked for certain things to be done. We've come up with some revenue assumptions. The top one, the fees and charges, 3%. In all fairness, there's not a lot of fees and charges and not a lot of revenue that comes from there. The service charges, they're the really important ones, CWMS and waste. So we basically charge those people that amount of money. The grants, we are trying to work, and hopefully we receive the money in the year that we want them budgeted. And you've probably seen other budgets where we got money in advance, and then there's a whole bunch of accounting treatments, and it makes the budget look quite awkward at times. Our rating assumptions, and these are the key things that elected members would be very keen on. CPI, so we're basing some assumptions on CPI plus 1.8% in year one as a minimum. CPI plus 2.5 to 5.9 if a future initiatives program is adopted. Now, you might remember what we presented a couple of weeks ago, that asset management or the big asset plan. That's really what we're talking about. I know that I sent it out with, I can't remember what the exact number was. It might have been 80 million. It doesn't actually matter what it is. I think the reality is you're probably not going to be able to afford to deliver the full program in itself. So Hafiz will talk about what those numbers might look like, and then we can, at another session, we can really squeeze those projects into something that looks like a program for the next 10 years. And of course, the last one is we're going to account for real growth separately, and I think that's really important that we do that. This is always the contentious one. Increases managed by rates in the dollar, so we don't worry about the valuations go up. We know they're going to go up again, but we manage it by the rate in the dollar. And I've got there, and high value rebates. So that's again what we did last year, or by capping. We're going to discuss that at a future session. Happy to talk about it a little bit today. We're not really in a position where we've got all the answers in relation to that. High value rebates, we're going to assume them to be 100% this year if we go down that path. And I'll tell you why that is. 82% of the budget was consumed this year with people seeking rebates. And what that probably indicates to you is that we've moved from the 30%, I think, in year one. We then moved a little bit more the next year. We're creeping up every year with the tightening of the household budgets. I would be very surprised if we don't get to that point. If you don't budget for the 100% of the rebates needing to be consumed, then you're not spreading that rebate across all of your ratepayers, and that's a really important feature that I think we need to do. The expense assumptions, I've basically done this in employee costs, materials, contracts, and other depreciation, etc. So you can see salaries and wages, we've got our EAs in place. We've already had the high rise. 4% and 4% will be the numbers. Future years beyond that, we've just gone from, you know, wage price indexes, super's going up. Staff turnover gap, we were running at about 91% this year, and that's what we budgeted for. So it might have looked a low number. We are budgeting for 95. We're seeing more of our positions are being filled for longer periods of time, even though we've got a bit of staff turnover. So, and that's really important to make note of. Non-salary cost increases are, again, round about 3%. So that's that materials, contracts and others. IAMP's going up by the LGPI index. Interest rate 2.25% reductions are being factored in over the course of the year. And I do want to put that in there, and that's that reduction in economic development. We haven't put that into the modelling as yet. Probably a couple of reasons for that. One is there were two presentations tonight that very much talked about what economic development do and the importance of them doing, and having people to actually do them. So the original motion that was put together won't even cover half of the department. Capital expenditure assumptions, as I said, LGPI. Asset renewal funded internally by internally generated funds. That's the depreciation. That's how we fund our asset renewal. Upgrades only funded where it occurs in the year to be renewed. And that may include the grant funding. So that's what we did last year with Bethel Road. Bethel Road was on the capital renewal program. So there we go. Okay, it's funded, but it could only be funded by getting the extra amount of money. So Bethel Road for next year, there's no asset renewal money for Bethel Road. So we've got to fund it through an upgrade program. Other upgrades to be funded through the Future Initiatives program. And again, thank you very much, everyone, for the commentary on that. It really helps us understand what people value, what they don't. And as I say, renewal funded through depreciation. This is the key one again for me, borrowing and repayment strategy. So no new borrowings for asset renewal or existing operations or initiatives. So in other words, whatever we're currently doing, we should be able to fund by getting the right amount of rate revenue, the right amount of, financial assistance grants or other income. Converting our CADs to principal and interest loan, we're expecting probably at the end of the year, and I say that approximately about $8.5 million in current CADs that we will have. And my view is we should be translating those into principal and interest loans. In other words, let's not confuse ourselves about what our budget really looks like. We need to pay off an $8.5 million debt, and I think we should set a plan from next year to do so. And then we would surrender any unused or unnecessary CADs. And I use that word unnecessary CADs because throughout the year, there may be times where we are required to borrow. Remember, we only get our first rate instalment in September and another one in December. So we don't always get all of our money right on day one. So there might be a reason that we actually go into the red a little bit, and we can use CADs for that, but know that those CADs will actually be repaid at the next quarterly instalments. And utilising any surplus cash to repay the principal and interest loans. Strategically borrow to achieve those future initiatives. What I can say is that, and Hafiz will show this, is without borrowing, being able to do a Waikato Road, being able to do basically even a Bethel Road in stages 2 and 3 are going to be very hard to achieve. So, and certainly, the Clare roads and all of the other things that were on that list. But the key thing is to borrow when we're able to afford the repayment. So obviously we can't, borrow everything in year one, and we want to make sure we're sustainable for that. So I'm going to hand over to Hafiz now, who is going to go through some of the scenarios that he's modelled, not only by dot point, but he's going to show you in a little table as to how it's all going to look.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. Good evening, members. So moving on from the presentation that Richard has given to you, I'll be showing you 3 models that I've 3 scenarios that I've modeled. And I mean, we could model 100 scenarios, but I just would like to get the feel from the elected members by showing you those 3 scenarios so that I can get some ideas that when I have to take the draft budget to the upcoming ARC meeting, that would help me understand, what is the feeling in the room? I mean, you guys don't have to make a decision right now, but the whole idea of this presentation is that I would like to understand what level of CPI plus rate increases we would be, putting into our draft version. Again, I use the word draft version. That means that whatever I put that through the ARC, we could still talk about it in the upcoming info session in the month of April. We can still change it, but the idea is so that at least I'll get some direction and some idea, where the elected members are, thinking. So anyway, so moving forward, scenario 1 talks about a deficit budget. Again, the reason I'm showing that deficit budget is so that in this scenario, we have incorporated CPI forecast only, nothing above CPI. How it looks like, yeah. So basically in this scenario, you could see that in year 1, 2, and 3, and 4, there's no increases on the top of the CPI. The only rate increases that we have got is the CPI increase. It's a very high level. You can see the total income and total expenditure. Each of those 4 financial years has got deficits. And in year 4, it becomes 3 million deficit. So that is on the assumption that we are loaning $42 million, based on the assumption that, we're going to go ahead with that borrowing and that program that Richard was just talking about a few moments ago, that future borrowings and strategic, that 10 years plan. So I have assumed that in this scenario, that if we are going ahead with that borrowing without rate increases on the top of CPI, this is how it's going to look like. So this is just to show you how it looks like. So scenario number 2, again, the borrowing level is $42 million as before. Sure. $42 million is based on, Councillor Colin, $42 million is based on those projects that Richard spoke about. And Richard sent that email, I think last week or probably the week before. So we are assuming that the borrowing would be in the next 10 years, like 12 million, 10 million, 10 million, and 10 million. So altogether, it's 42 million over the period of 10 years. So that's the assumption in the LTFP. But again, up to the elected members, you guys might decide to say, you know what, if we don't go with full borrowing, go with 50% of that figure, or don't go with the borrowing at all. But I need to start my budgeting process from somewhere so that I could, lead the discussion from there. But this scenario assumes $42 million of borrowing. And within that 42 million, that 8.5 million of repayment of CAD is also included, that Richard mentioned. So in other words, 8.5 million of repayment of the CAD or refinancing of the CAD, I would use the word, plus the other borrowing for those projects. Yeah. That's all separate. We haven't incorporated that just so that you guys can see the overall impact of, this being.
Just a very quick question for Ken.
Sure.
What's driving the compounding deficit?
It's the repayment of those loans, the interest repayments that we have to pay. In the year 1, obviously, I've assumed only 1 repayment, but in year 2, it's going to be 2 repayments every 6 months. And obviously, each year, because the borrowing is increasing, the interest obviously is increasing, and plus, other factors are also contributing.
So the base case is that we're delivering the future projects initiative and funding it through debt.
Yes.
But we're not increasing rates any further than CPI.
Not at all. That shows you that there is no rate increase on the top of CPI at all.
Thank you.
Of course, that's not, I'm just showing that to you guys for as a comparison. For me, I don't think so it's financially sustainable. That's yeah. So scenario 2, the scenario 1 will help me explain you scenario 2. Because in scenario 2, all the factors are exactly the same. The only thing that has changed is that I've added rates on the top of the CPI and kind of, I would say break even. It's $17,000 surplus. It's not a surplus. It's like a kind of a break even, just to show you how it would look like. Same assumption, $42 million loan, and the same as income and expenditure. Everything is the same. The only thing that has changed is the rates income on the top of the CPI. So in the first year, is 4.8%, which is 3% CPI and 1.8% on the top of the CPI, gives us 4.8%. So we're going to have break even $70,000 surplus. And in the year 2, you will see it's 8.7. And I know you will be thinking, why it's suddenly a jump? Again, because in year 1, there's only 1 loan repayment assumed. I mean, we're not going to start, we're not going to take a loan on 1st of July and start working on the 1st of July. It's going to take some time if we go to that part. But in year 2, I've assumed that both the loan repayments are going to be there. But plus, each year, other factors are also increasing, like, depreciation goes up and other factors. So, but just to show you those 4 years so that you can get an idea how it will cost us to deliver that, massive project of $42 million. But we can still have a non-deficit budget by increasing the rates on the top of what levels of CPI. This is just the high level. I know we're not showing you the nitty gritty, the details, but the $42 million borrowing is still assumed in this scenario.
So obviously the 8.7 sticks out, right? So, I mean, there would be some push and pull potentially in that spending wave to smooth out if council was to go this way. I'm not suggesting we are, but to
of course
shave that sort of bit off the top and even it out a bit more, yeah.
And I totally agree with you, Councillor, Acting Mayor. This is what Richard was saying earlier, that, this is not a final This is just to show you how it looks like right now. Again, depending on what the elected members decide, we might ease some borrowing in the first few years, and we might increase the borrowing in the year 4 or 5, or we might go a little bit slow in the beginning, a little bit, or depending on we overall reduce the program by whatever is more financially sustainable. But for me to at least start the conversation, this is like a starting point. So, you don't have to make any decision today, but it's just to show you how it looks like. So now I'm going to move forward to my last scenario, which is the
So
scenario.
I think councillor Collin had a
Oh, sorry.
question and councillor
Sorry, I
Simon.
didn't see that.
Yeah, I'm just a bit confused. I know they're talking about the 42 million, but we spoke about it the other night. It was an idea that we were going to borrow this money. But why are we going to waste our time if we're not going to borrow that much money? Like, I know it's a start, you're saying it's a starting point, we've got to start somewhere, but there's no way I'm going to support borrowing that amount of money. So,
And that's what I wanted to know, sorry.
so why don't we actually work out where we're going to be first rather than sit down and, go. It seems to me we're going here and going backwards when I think we should work from the bottom and go forward, but it seems asked about face to me what we're doing.
I totally agree with the councillor, Colin. This is the first time that I would say that in my scenario, I have done the next scenario with less borrowing.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Just so that everybody in the room can get an idea, the extreme, the middle, and, all that sort of stuff. And I totally agree with you. And obviously, for me to go and tweak that, it's going to be a few hours job, but that I can go and change that in my modeling. But I totally agree with the question. If you're not going to borrow that level, perfect. That's actually less work for me. If it's more work, it's more work for me and my team. But again, it's up to the elected members. I can't make that decision. My job is to show you how it will look like, And obviously, if I believe, based on my expert knowledge, that I think it's not financially sustainable, I will let you guys know that. But again, at the end of the day, it's your decision. So,
Councillor Simon, did you have a question as well, or you're okay?
Yeah, it was a very similar question.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. What happens if we have the 42 million to what 21 million or whatever?
Oh, yeah.
What the impact is now? I'm sure you're going to get that.
I think you have read the presentation. That the next one was 25 million. So I'll move to the scenario number 3 now. So scenario number 3 is assume $25 million. And the borrowing includes $8.5 million of the CAD, because that CAD is incorporated in all those 3 borrowing scenarios. And again, small surpluses, I have made that kind of break even. And in this scenario, you will see again CPI plus small increases, and it will look like this. So $25 million loans, and obviously assumption is $25 million contribution to major projects. And in the year 1, it's 3 plus 1.5%, which is 4.5%. So again, I won't call that a big surpluses, but it's kind of a break even. But at least it's not red, and at least we could say that if we go to that level of borrowing. But again, as Councillor Collins said, that if the chamber decides not to go ahead with borrowing at all, of course I'll have to go and change these scenarios. But these are the 3 scenarios that I have prepared, so that at least I'll get some idea before I take my draft version to the ARC meeting. And the only 2 things that I would like to feel from this room today, if I go out from this room by getting those 2, I won't use the word answer, but if I get an idea that what is the capacity of the chamber to increase the rates on the top of CPI, and what borrowing strategy are we going to go ahead with? Are we going to go ahead with 42 million? Are we going to go ahead with 25 million? Or are we going to go ahead with no borrowing at all? So these are the few things that I would like to understand, or I would like to feel, I would use the word, so that I can incorporate that into my, the draft version for the LTB. Yep, Councillor Simon.
I'm a bit confused about this now, because before we had the high borrowing option, and it looked very similar to this. Like we had the 4.5, the 8.5, the 4.5. Yeah. So and the operating zone is the same. So how doesn't there's no impact in only borrowing half?
Because I think it's a good question, because we have incorporated most of that borrowing in the first 4 years. Because previously it was across the 10 years. Now it's 25 million, but obviously we have got there could be the same level of borrowing in the first couple of years, but in the future years, there will be no borrowing at all. Yeah, sure.
Probably what I'll say to that is, as Hafiza said, the very first year. So if you think about a $40 million, program, it's $4 million a year. 25, it's $2.5 million a year. So it's only $1.5 million difference. But in year one, you're borrowing $8.5 million. In fact, in year one, you're borrowing $8.5 million plus your first year's program. So you're borrowing in the 11 million. So that's what your principal and interest is on. So that is really hit high. So when you take your next loan out, as an example, your next loan might be 7 million in that first 4-year period, because you'd probably go year 1, year 3 in terms of, you know, what you're borrowing, because your first 2 years, if you borrowed, say, $12 million, you've got $8.5 million, so that pays the CAD off, but now we're starting to repay that, so we're using some of that cash. You got $3.5 million to deliver a short program. So if you looked at the 10 years, you'd probably see bigger differences, and what you would see in the 10 years is greater growth in revenue during that period. We're not seeing the full extent of our revenue growth early on. But what this is really highlighting to us is, you know, and that is that what we've got to do to simply get a break-even budget, because you've still got, either way you look at it, you've got $8.5 million that you've got to repay. And if you want to repay $8.5 million in 10 years, you need $850,000 in principal a year.
Yeah, but that's not showing that, is it? So you're going to show
This is incorporated into this.
Yeah, but the CAD's you're already doing the CAD anyway. So even if the CAD's, if you didn't do this, the CAD would still be there.
The CAD would be there, and we would be simply, we would have the same amount of interest, but you wouldn't be making loan repayments.
Yeah.
And eventually what's going to happen is, and this is the point that Nigel had been making, you know, time and time again, was the CADs have an expiry date. So when the CADs have an expiry date, so what I would probably say is, I think 29/30, I'd have to go back to that information, you've got CADs that need to be repaid. So in other words, you've got to refinance them. You can refinance them with a CAD, but what I would suspect is, and we met with the LGFA only a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and their view very much was, well, we're not going to keep giving council CADs if they're not going to do anything about repaying their debt.
But council's been doing this for 20 years. The only thing that saved council before was Bunyip One, because otherwise, because it was just getting higher and higher and higher and higher, and then you know, you got a golden goose, and then we got out of trouble. So really, we're going to have to set. It's a good practice to have a debt with a repayment program. I can concede that, but I just can't see. I think the level seems very high to me, and why don't we go and find out what roads we want to do, what programs we want to do, find that out, and then find the amount of money we want to spend. Because any business, you know, if I'm running a business, I'd always go and do a case study on what I want to buy, how much it's going to cost, the repayment schedule, all that sort of stuff. Then I go to the bank and say, this is what I want. Well, this is sort of just saying we get this much and do what we like. It seems a bit.
Definitely not. In fact, I think this, even though I agree with you, this is a high borrowing number. Remember, there's $80 million worth of work that the elected members have been submitting to staff to say, we think this is all important for us to do. All we're saying is, the good thing is, in my view, is that you can only do half that work. So you're going to really have to think about what you want to put in every year. And that's a good position to be in, rather than the position of being, let's do the $80 million because we've put $80 million in there. I'd rather be saying, no, do $40 million, because you're really going to have to think about every dollar you're going to spend.
Thanks, Councillor Collin. We'll be able to prioritise, well, we're comfortable at 25 or whatever it ends up being, and then that means out of that list of 74 million, we need to work out what fits in that. I think that's what this is about, isn't it? Yep.
What I can say is that when we look at our current budget and the current process we've been through, our asset renewal, as I said the other week, is very good. We've got $1 million in upgrade money. So we're spending our money on upgrades, but we're not repaying our loan. So we're wanting to do the good stuff, but we haven't put any discipline in place. So if we go back to basically going, you know what, we're going to borrow no money. We're going to borrow no money at all, but we are going to start repaying our debt. If that was the proposition that Hafiz and I take away tonight, there will be no upgrades. There will be no upgrades. We will be delivering the asset renewal program. I would say we would be having to cut asset renewal programs because roads like Bethel Road, which we've effectively committed to, obviously we've done stage 1 this year. I think there would be a high confidence in administration that we would get stage 2 funding, but we need $667,000 as our contribution. And what I'm saying is without borrowing, that money is unlikely to be there. There is definitely no Ward Belt Road, Parkers Road, Oates Road, Harbs Road, Wycott Road. They won't exist because we simply won't have the revenue. Councillor Fabio?
Yeah, 2 questions quickly, Richard, and sorry, I can't remember your name. Aviz. Through the chair, of course. The first one is, has any consideration been given to paying off the CADs without going down the process of getting a principal and interest loan? So you talked about that that maturity date of the CADs or whatever. Is there any scope to basically paying them off by the maturity date so we don't end up in a process where we're borrowing money to pay off borrowed money? That's the first question. The second one is, have we factored in the rate revenue increase from Roseworthy expansion?
Yeah, first question. At the moment, our principal and interest loans, in terms of the interest rate on them versus a CAD, is pretty competitive. So, in fact, I think the P&I they said was slightly better than the CAD. So,
If it goes longer term.
yeah, if it goes longer term. So, yeah. But you're quite right. Can we pay it off? Well, yes, we can pay it off. It would be the answer. And that bottom line that you've got there, which is the operating surplus, needs to be a bit better number to be paying them down. But what I would say is one of the things I like about the principal and interest loan, and that is that when we show you the cash flow statement, it will show the commitment to paying the principal and interest loan, distinct from the CAD, okay, which is like no one's got a commitment here. This relies on our good discipline. So I think bringing that that principle into our statements, I think, is a very good proposition for this council. And the second one, sorry. Definitely have. Yep, it's all in there, and it's and there's strong numbers.
Thank you. So yeah, I think the way Richard was explaining was, I totally agree with that. That having that debenture loan will give us some discipline in terms of paying those CADs. Because one of the things that loan does is that CADs cost us interest for a very short period of time, for 2, 3, 4 years, whereas a longer term loan will kind of distribute that depending on how long we're going to go with the loan. But in order to repay that, one of the things that, for example, I've got 3 scenarios. What my feeling that I'm getting, one of the fourth scenario, as Richard said, could be that, fine, you guys are not going to go ahead with any borrowing, but would you still be okay for us to borrow in year 1, or perhaps when the first CAD is getting mature, which is probably in year 2, perhaps, to get that CAD converted into a debenture loan as a minimum borrowing strategy? Because we are still under debt for that figure regardless. So all we're saying is to convert that into a debenture loan. Would that be a bare minimum borrowing that the elected members would be okay for us to model that into our scenario as well? Yeah.
I'd be very, and I think I said it to Nigel quite a few times, that I didn't think these cabs were sustainable. I think that a long-term loan would be better. But what you're saying, Richard, is there's all these commitments that have been brought to you by us. I think a lot of these have been around for a long time, and they haven't been here. They haven't been presented or haven't been presented to or they're not ideas of this present council. So there are a lot on the list that I don't think we should be doing, and I think we could be quite ruthless in taking them off, and I think we could get it down a fair bit further. But one thing I do strongly believe is doing a road like that we have to keep re-sheeting. It's a false economy. If we can put black stuff on it and borrow a bit of money to make it so it maintains it to a level where we don't have to keep going back, because I know Ebenezer Road's one, we keep going back, we keep putting more metal on it. A year later, it's stuff. So you're going to grade the crap out of it. You're better off borrowing the money and fixing it, and then it's going to save money. And it's good borrowing, but just borrowing for the sake of borrowing, I think we're going to be very careful, in my opinion.
Yeah, look, don't disagree at all. I suppose what I would, my comments to the elected members would be, you've clearly articulated what your aspirations are. They might not be 80 million, they might be 20 million over the 10-year period. If they are 20 million, how are you going to fund that? How do you raise, and whether it's, whether you turn around and say, look, we don't want to borrow money, but what we want to do is we want to raise our rates, we want to bank some money, and when we've got enough money, we'll then spend it on whatever the project is. And I would always say this, we could argue the projects till the cows come home. I reckon on that list, there's probably 75% of them I would look at and go, I think they're pretty good projects that the community would absolutely value. But if it's 75% of 80 million, it's $60 million. How are we going to do that? How are we going to do that and set a plan for 10 years? Or in the 10 years, do you go, can we do 20 million in 10 years? Or do nothing and simply go through your asset renewal and we go, we're looking after what we've got.
But the problem you've got with what you're saying is that, the community might want all these things, but then you put their rates through the roof and they're going to scream like banshees. So you got to have the community expectation has to be met, but their expectation has to be within the means of the council. So we can't just go and buy this. Like, a lot of this stuff is pretty, I don't think we really need some of it. So I think, it's hard. And Bill talking earlier about, if you go and look at doing money for drought, well, you can't rates is one thing that, rather than taking money from them and giving it back, it might be just don't take it from them in the first place. That might be an easier scenario. So then that's going to stuff the whole plan up as well.
I think the choice that we're being asked, or the indication we're being asked to give, is what level of commitment are we prepared to accept. I think the message is that if we keep rate increases at CPI, then we're just covering cost increases in the economy, and we're not doing anything else. So I think the ratepayers, we would need to be very clear with ratepayers that, if there's a premium to deliver these additional projects, these are the additional projects that we've been asked to fund, but we can't fund them out of CPI increases because we're just covering increased costs year on year.
But the problem we've got is we've tried to do CPI increases for the last few years and it hasn't worked because the value of the land's gone up so much. The value of General's done all this work for us, but the take home rate revenue has been going up. So most people are suffering a fair bit. So if you borrow, anyway, we've got to work out how much you want to borrow. That's
just to answer a piece question. I definitely think the 8.5 million we need to borrow. And when we have a repayment schedule, is it 10 years or what's you said 10 years before, what's a standard repayment of a 8.5 million loan? Is it commercial?
Yep. Through the chair, my understanding is that it was in those 10 years period, we're going to borrow. I mean, we were modeling that we're gonna borrow $42 million, 12 million the year one, and in the next 2 or 3 years, it will be repaid, and then we will borrow another 10 million. And then in the next 2 or 3 years, it will be repaid, and then we borrow another 10 million. I think at any point in time, our borrowing was not more than.
I'll just clarify that. It wasn't completely repaid. We were repaying them. So I think I did it in year 1, 12 million, year 3, 10, year 6, 10, and year 8, a further 10. And at any point in time, our borrowing ratios never exceeded our revenue, if that makes sense. So our total borrowing never exceeded our total revenue for the year. But I think what we're picking up is that that's a step too far, which means that future initiatives program would need to be scaled back, and obviously we'd need to do some work around that. And that would be a dedicated session where we would go through it and really carefully think about where we wanted to invest our money. And look, my view would be a $2 million upgrade program per year isn't a big number. And I use that on average. I say that on average because we know that if we do a Clare Road, we're going to be at, you're going to consume basically that whole amount, each year. Being able to, do a Parbs Road, even, just to a sheeted category. I mean, Noack Road, Ruben Noack has been, coming to this council for the 15 years that I've been here, asking for it to be, upgraded to an all-weather road. And I think if you ask Mick Meaney, Mick could probably say Ruben's been asking for, the 10 years prior to that. Look, there's a lot of good stuff in that plan, and I think I'd be, I think elected members would be keen to, to start that process of trying to deliver them, but equally, make sure that we've got that debt contained. I think we've got a bit of a feel, and like I say, what we don't want to do is come back with a budget where everyone looks at it and goes, that's a fantastic budget, it's a fairly neutral budget, and everyone goes, well, are there money for upgrades? And it's just no, there's nothing. I don't think that's a good thing. The other thing that I think is a really good thing to do, and that is setting your plan this year. Next year, you will be setting a plan 2 months out from going into caretaker mode. And you might not want to do that, or you might want to do that. You might want to really commit the next council. But if you're in a good position and feel that you can do something, I think this year's a good year to do it. Remember, we don't have to borrow for years 3, 6, and 8 at the moment. We just need to set that repayment and probably top that up a little bit with, can't remember what the number is, but it's probably between 2.5 and 3.5 million. And that will ensure that for the next 2 years, you can actually deliver some really good upgrade programs.
So yeah, it will be $12 million borrowing, and out of the $12 million, 8.5 will be approximately for the CAD conversion, and the remaining, whatever that amount is going to be, because that figure could change slightly, is what Richard is referring to. In theory.
Through the chair. Hypothetically, instead of 26, 27 being 8.7%, if that was moved into 25, 26, that would essentially give us an operating surplus, a greater operating surplus, which could then even out. So, it's a trending down scale further down the table, rather than sort of peaking and then sort of coming back slowly. If we had that initial hit in that first year, it would give us more of an operating surplus, which would then cushion the blow and also enable us to potentially pay off more than, minimum rate type thing on our borrowings, meaning that long term we wouldn't be paying as much interest over a 10-year period, right?
I think I understand what you're saying. You're saying that 4.8 in year 1 might be too low.
I'm not saying it is. So I'm just saying hypothetically,
would you move some in and smooth it out a bit?
Yeah, for argument's sake.
I'll just respond to that, sorry. The reason, through the chair, the reason it's 8.7 in year two, because we have assumed that we're gonna have $42 million loan. And also we have assumed that there are gonna be 2 loan repayments in that year. So that's why we have increased that to balance that to $22,000, which is like a, but kind of mini surplus, you could say. But if you're not gonna go ahead with that level of borrowing, we might not have to increase that by 8.7%. We might have to increase that by a little bit less. Or obviously, actually, not a little bit less, could be more or less, depending on, it all depends how we split that program. We might do more of the spending in year 3 and less spending in year 2 and maximum spending in year 5, or a little bit spending in year 1. It all depends, how Richard, Megan, and elected members decide to deliver that program. But that's in our control. I would use the word manipulate that depending on which year we're going to increase what level of rates. And, let's say we've got more capacity to increase by, 8.7% in 2027-28. Well, that's the year that we should be spending most of that program, for example. That could be one strategy. But what Richard was saying, a simple strategy could be, let's say for $25 million borrowing, 2.5 in each year for the next 10 years. That is just to make things simpler so that everybody's on the same page, But even if we adopt that, next year when we are in the same process, we might change that future program. We might bring something forward. We might push few things back, depending on the economic indicators at that time or the appetite for the rate increase, and all of, like, for example, drought was mentioned in the room. Yes, that's definitely one of the factors. So just because we have adopted that this year does not mean that the future years cannot be changed next year. But for me to be able to take something to the ARC, the whole idea was to have this presentation to get the feeling in the room, and I think myself and Richard have got slight feeling that perhaps the $42 million appetite is not there. If I'm not wrong, but again. I think you've got a question.
I think Councillor Collin was before me.
Sorry.
Oh, no, so, maybe, you put a table out and I see, Michael did a version, I did a version, and Simon did a version. Have you seen those?
I hadn't seen Simon's version. I had seen the others, and thank you for the feedback. And I'm aware there are plenty of errors through it.
Errors in what?
From my point of view of what I put out, but I don't think I made
errors on our behalf.
No, on my behalf. I think I double ticked boxes and had duplicated bits and pieces in there, but
yeah, so it might be helpful if people were to actually give you some guidance in what they want to do. Like
it's helped a lot.
Yeah, it's that's good you've seen it.
I think what will happen is, sorry, Michael. I think what will happen is we will have a dedicated session where we just go through and absolutely tear that thing to pieces. I would be disappointed for the community if what we brought back this year was basically saying there's nothing in there for anybody. Because if we want to just balance the budget up, like Hafiza showed there, and get our existing borrowings properly controlled, I just don't think there's going to be money left over for any upgrades. And there's a lot of that stuff that I just think is fantastic stuff to do.
Just to strengthen the feeling of you guys' feelings, at least I'll give you my take on it. Is that I think the $8.5 million, which is the CAD, we need to turn that into a repayment schedule thing. As you said, I think that's a must. And I think in general, borrowing is a good thing. 42 is too high, but I think we should borrow because it's a very equitable thing to do. Because obviously only for capital projects that will benefit the community for the next 10 or 20 years, then borrowing is a very equitable thing to do, because then not just the people now pay for something that the people later are going to enjoy, we're going to spread that cost over the people that are going to enjoy it. So I'm absolutely for some borrowing if it's very strategic and very beneficial for the community for a long time, and we definitely need to do that $8.5 million. I think that's a no-brainer.
The other thing I suggest is something with these borrowings is, like I know Dutton Park, we borrowed money to do an upgrade. I think that's a great way to really get borrowings. It's borrowing that goes in our book, but it's a great way of putting money into the community. It's someone's doing it rather than us. It's driven, and we just borrow the money, they pay you back, or I think that's because I know you've got some of these like Dutton Park and others in here that you want to give a lot of money to. Well, I think it's lend them the money and let it do it, and then they pay it back rather than us just going and doing this big project. That's another way to look at borrowing as well.
Yeah, I suppose the mechanics of how that could occur in the future, and I use Dutton Park as an example where I think it showed 2 years of $5 million each. In reality, it might be. I can't see that Dutton Park could make loan repayments of $10 million, but how that structure looked in the future could be quite different from just a straight council funding it. But I suppose we've got to start somewhere. We've got to think to the future of what it means when we put 400 new homes up on Gundry's Hill one day but I suppose that's all part of what our role here is to make sure that we're setting our community up for the future and not setting it up to fail. So we'll use some of the principles in this presentation will be provided to elected members, so you've got a little bit of a feel, and we'll bring something back that's sorry.
You've got one more slide.
Oh, I've got the wrap-up slides. Sorry. Yeah, thanks. First draft of the budget to ARC in the next couple of weeks. Further briefing session on the future initiatives, as I said. Rating briefing session. That's going to be really important to get our heads around it. We are aware that we've got primary production valuations that have again exceeded,
and also residential.
Both.
Yep.
Up at 30%. So we know that that's going to be challenging in terms of, they're smiling now, but no, that will be challenging in terms of how we set the rates equitably. And obviously the remainder of the budget timetable, we, work our way through and my apologies. And
I'll just add one point.
Yeah.
For that rating. Thanks for that, Richard. So as Richard said that we have done a very quick initial analysis about primary production and residential, and we found few areas where there's significant volatility. However, the reason I haven't mentioned that in my earlier presentation, because I wanted to understand what is the revenue target that we're gonna set first. Once that target is set, then it's the matter of playing around with the rates in the dollar. I don't want to confuse that discussion now because I don't know what the revenue target is at this stage. But yes, we will be talking about that more sometime in the April sessions that Richard is going to organize. But before we get to that discussion, that revenue target is more important at this stage so that we know overall how it looks like. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you. And look, what I can honestly say is if we want to meet here every Tuesday, we've got so much information, with these type of things. I mean, we've gone for more than an hour. I didn't think we were going to go that long, but there's this is a topic that's very, very important to you guys in the community to get this right. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Richard. So then that leads us in for next meeting will be held on Tuesday the 22nd of April, commencing at 5 p.m. at the Kapunda Council Chamber. Declare the meeting closed at 7:29 p.m. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone.